Welcome, Wargamers. Doug here from 2 Plus Stuff, and today we are taking another crack at the Skaven Battle Tome, picking out a really cool story. Now, most of these Battle Tomes, or in fact all of them, have these great little timeline segments, but the Skaven one is unique because there's a section in the front called Red and Fang and Claw, which hosts a few, like 2 or 3 larger stories. And that's what we're going to be reading today because it directly ties Kragnos, the ender of empires and the god of earthquakes, into the Skaven, and also shines a little bit of light into what happened that we did not directly see in Broken Realms Kragnos. So this is a story that has a few things. It brings the Skaven into the main narrative, shows how they respond, or I guess interact with Kragnos himself, and also fills in some gaps that we might have missed in Broken Realms. Now, really quickly before we jump into that, if you are interested in Skaven or any Age of Sigmar stuff, please consider using my affiliate link in the description down below for Not Just Gaming. It's a wonderful store with up to 30% off on Games Workshop products, as well as all different kinds of paints and hobby supplies like AK Interactive, Vallejo, all these kinds of great companies. And using that link goes a long way to supporting me, my wife, our business, our cats, everything, and I'm so thankful for everyone who has. And with that out of the way, let's jump into today's story, the Bloat Eruption. The clan's Pestilens had long known that somewhere within the Gurish heartlands existed a vital ingredient required for one of the 13 Great Plagues, the bloat eruption. This metaphysical malady was recorded in the page of the Liber Predatoris, and according to the hallowed plague tome, it would cause the infected to swell with tremulous energies, their hair or fur falling out and their eyes boggling out of their skull. Then the victim would detonate a shower of viscera, 1,000 bloated blood ticks bursting from their ruptured bodies. Many ingredients for this great plague had already been gathered. The bottled death tremors of 100 elf mages, gore extracted from a gargant-sized giga-tick, and half a dozen other disgusting items besides. All that remained, according to the scrawlings of the Liber Praetorius, was something called Hair of the Earthquake. The trouble was that the Church of Contagion had not the faintest idea what that meant. It was only with the awakening of a primordial god Kragnos that an enterprising plague priest named Icbite was struck by an idea. Had he not heard Kragnos described as a living earthquake unleashed upon the realms? Calling in every favor at his disposal, Icbite hired a troop of assassins from clan Shushbik, who had already established gutter warrens beneath Excelsius, the city unfortunate enough to be on the receiving end of Kragnos' wrath. As the Battle of Excelsius raged around them, these skulking killers slipped through the carnage in search of their quarry. Kragnos was pulverizing a Sigmarite chapel with his oversized mace when they came upon him. His sheer size and manic fury was almost enough to make them turn tail and flee. Recalling the warpstone riches Icbite had promised them, however, the Shushbik assassins crept up on the rampaging Drogok, that's his race of Kragnos is, and with their daggers, clipped a paw of his matted fur. Reacting with terrifying speed, Kragnos instantly whipped about and squashed 3 Skaven under his hooves. The surviving assassins fled in terror, clutching their prize. An unbearably smug Icbite was proved correct in his assumptions when Pestilens plague brewers added this hair of the earthquake to their malefic concoctions. As they did so, the ground beneath Blight City began to tremble and splinter. Great fissures opened in the earth, spilling forth a tide of demonic, rat-faced blood ticks that swept across the city, plunging into the many gnaw-holes that dotted the Skaven capital. Thus was unleashed the 9th of the 13 Great Plagues. Okay, so first off, there's a lot to unpack here. This is a cool story. If you're not familiar with Clans Pestilens, they are a sect of Skaven, a type of subgroup of them, that really revere the plague delivery system that is the Horned Rat. All Skaven worship the Horned Rat. They all see themselves as, his chosen avatar. That's why they're all crazy and manic and have these delusions of grandeur. But some Skaven specifically worship the Great Horned Rat's use of chemical warfare, or biological warfare rather. And the difference between Pestilens and Nurgle is that the clan's Pestilens want to use biological weapons to scour the realms and assert Skavendom as sort of like the chief amongst everything, whereas Nurgle wants to amplify the cycle of life. One of these things breaks, living matter into billions of life forms in the form of microbial diseases. Nurgle loves that. Pestilens literally want everything dead. It's a weapon to achieve their goals instead of a fact of life that is kind of twisted and turned. And this whole section of Skavendom that reveres the biological weapon, Clan's Pestilens, have an entire religious order. In fact, they are the most religious of the Skaven. Their words and terms for like different ranks and stuff all have deep church roots. They're kind of stylized as being, a head preacher almost, galvanizing his flock and moving them towards, his vision of what the Great Horn Rat wants them to do. And within the context of their belief system, which of course there's always room for you to write your own, but the overarching idea is that there are 13 quote-unquote great plagues. These are mega diseases that are ground-shaking in their intensity. I'm sure Nurgle would love to see some of them come to fruition just for his own sake, but on the whole, these are life cycle enders, right? They're not something Nurgle wants to do because he likes the rebirth of new life. And so this religion preaches that once we have all 13 great plagues, right, once we've achieved this momentous religious moment by reclaiming all the quote-unquote artifacts, in this case massive science experiments to brew terrible diseases, then we will be able to march forth as the Great Horn Rat's chosen and subjugate the realms. Right, once we get these 13 things, these 13 weapons, we will be unstoppable. And so this to me is really fun because there's always kind of a side quest whenever you're playing Pestilens of like, who has the ingredients we need? You could be having missions that are out there to harvest things from various people. They mentioned like the remains of 100 elf wizards. Like, that's cool. What a great motivation for any fight against any kind of elf army. It's super fun. Now, one thing that was mentioned here that I had never heard before was the Liber Predatoris, this old ancient religious text that they have that mentions, yeah, we achieved one of these great plagues, but we lost it. We don't know how to make it again. And so, while some Skaven within the Pestilens clans are out there searching for remnants of different diseases to try to find a lead on these 13 great plagues, Ickbite instead internally went to look at a really, really old textbook that mentioned one long ago. So he's trying to like archaeology piece this puzzle together instead of just going out and searching blindly. Now we're going to fast forward a little bit. Kragnos has risen because of the Right of Life. I have several videos about that here on the channel. But it's not until he hears someone mention that he is like the god of earthquakes that this, that synapse finally fires. Whatever sad, dead hamster is on the wheels inside of his brain gives one last, death curl and spins it one more time. And there we go. The idea has been made. He knows what he wants. Now, in the Broken Realms story, specifically Broken Realms Kragnos, he comes out of the mountain that he is awoken from his prison, and he makes a beeline for the city of Excelsius because it's built relatively close to where his homeland used to be. So he thinks that they are invaders, taking his family's land, that kind of stuff, and he's going to go, we'll say, bloody their nose. Within that same book, Excelsius was actually attacked by a Skaven army right before Kragnos appeared. Now, the distance between where Kragnos was kept in prison and Excelsius, it's like half a continent, so I assume that there was plenty of time, right? Along that journey, he also meets up with Gordrak, and they assemble a massive wall with mega gargants, everything. So, like, I assume that there was time for him to hear about Kragnos' reawakening, and then to, like, look over at Excelsius and be like, I know where he's headed, so if I want a sample of this guy's fur, whatever that is, on the lark that it might be it, I at least know where he's going. And so he dispatches a whole bunch of assassins. One thing that I like about these little stories in the Skaven book is they show you how the clans work together. They're constantly hiring and bartering with one another. So yes, he's the religious order, and yes, he needs this thing. And no, he doesn't want to tell anybody what it's for. You got to keep those secrets close to the chest. But I will hire someone to go get it for me. And the clan's Eshin, sort of the assassin arm of the Great Horned Rat's armies, are all too happy to do that. They don't ask a lot of questions, provided you don't ask them a lot of questions. And the next time they need something, maybe a whole bunch of zealots to cause a distraction, yeah, they'll come right back to the clan's Pestilens and they'll sort a deal there. Again, it's all these individual clans and tiny tyrants with all kinds of megalomaniac power working together to achieve something big. So they send a bunch of assassins. We didn't see this in the story because I assume it would be a minor footnote to be like, and then there were some Skaven trampling around his hooves and most of them died. Like that would be the footnote in the Broken Realm story. Not super exciting, but they do get a snippet of his fur. They bring it back to Ickbite, who's super smug. I love the fact that they described him as unbearably smug, which is, I mean, most of what I see on Twitter. And he throws it in the pot. And I say that kind of loosely. All these things are massive, elaborate, almost like church services, like those really like long 3-hour Catholic mass type things. That's the kind of idea we get with the clan's Pestilens. And it turns out that he was absolutely right. Now, here's the cool thing about the Skaven clans when it comes specifically to Pestilens, is that whenever they enact part of their will, meaning achieving a great plague or poisoning a certain thing, things get really above and beyond ridiculous. Like, these great plagues are so over-the-top absurd. Like, each one of them should be its own Iron Maiden album cover art. Bloat for eruption essentially creates a whole bunch of demonic lice that somehow have the face of rats, and when it affects somebody, their skin boils and twists and turns, their eyes bug out, and they explode, showering the area with a whole bunch of these ticks, essentially. Which then, presumably, do the same thing over and over again. Now, if it is a true tick, in terms of its size and that kind of thing, it would make this a super weapon. We think about things like the Black Plague that happened in our real life, where now you're using nature to carry, from civilization to civilization, the most deadly diseases imaginable. And there are a whole bunch of other ones. All the Great Plagues, I should do a video just about the Great Plagues, because they're all horrific. They're all the worst ways to die. And this is no exception, right? Having insects and stuff crawl inside of your body, you're essentially opening a rift to chaos within your own chest, because these are a demonic type of insect, if you will. So it's like ripping you open from the inside. You explode, there's blood, guts, and gore everywhere. And now everybody around you is going to do the same thing here pretty soon. I love it. It's so over the top, and it just works with what the Skaven want to do, because again, they're not trying to just beat you militarily and conquer you. Like, there are chaos armies, Blades of Corn and stuff. They'll come in and they'll subjugate an area. Yes, they will kill a lot of them and probably eat a bunch too, but they'll also recruit some, right? They'll build whatever is existing there into their factions. We have stories of Coronate cities functioning entirely, but the Skaven don't see it that way. So when they drop a weapon on an enemy, it is for their complete and utter annihilation. And so being able to wield something like the bloat for eruption plague is a terrifying notion. And so let's step back here and simply ask the question, why is this cool? And there's a lot going on here. First of all, I love whenever factions have sort of ambiguous quests that they're on, but they're just specific enough for you to get excited, but vague enough for there to always be more room for development. So this is a perfect example of that. The clan's Pestilens are the religious sect of the Skaven, and they want to obtain 13, for lack of a better word, artifacts. You know, recipes, I guess is probably the more accurate term, but the method by which they can create 13 Great Plagues. Each one of those can be a full campaign series for you if you wanted to write that. Just crazy ingredients that they are trying to get. The fact that that is all shrouded in religious iconography and linguistics is just phenomenal to me. And allows for so much creativity when it comes to lore writing, because you can have these crazy, posts of office titles and that kind of thing for your tiny little Skaven warriors. It's so fun. And while I am in no way tempted to play a Skaven army, if someone were to twist my arm or I got one for free somehow, it would be Clan's Pestilens. They just have the coolest ideas for bringing priests into the midfield and then thematically dumping diseases all over everything, which is exactly what they're supposed to do. Everybody is a zealot and chaff and disposable, except for the priest, the holy man who knows the will of the great horned rat, dispensing his gifts upon the realms. And while I don't want like 1,000 stories like this of the Skaven, having all these different MacGuffins in play of stealing Kragnos' fur, or maybe they broke into Azurheim and stole something, like I don't want it to be like the Mary Sue where they just kind of always get what they need. But it is really cool to see for this particular subfaction a little notch, right? A little step forward to increase their overall threat level. To remind the rest of Skavendom, no, we got a few tricks. We got tricks that you don't even know about, right? How many other Skaven know about the Liber Predatoris, this ancient tome that depicts mega diseases from ages lost? Kragnos hasn't been around in thousands of years. Who wrote this book? I have no clue. How they would have referenced the god of earthquakes? No idea. But that's not really relevant. What is relevant is tens of thousands of demonic plague mites bursting forth all over the Skaven homeworld and then going out through different gnaw holes. It's infecting the realms. And just as, an infection in your bloodstream gets carried throughout your body, to infect gnaw holes is to spread a super weapon through the veins of the realms themselves. It's brutal, and I love the story. So that is my thoughts on the bloat fur eruption. Shout out to Clans Pestilens. If you're a Pestilens player, high fives all around, because they're the coolest Skaven by far. And while I couldn't find anything in the rulebook, like you have Great Plagues as abilities for their faction rules, this one is not denoted, so it must be so stinking new that you can't even play it yet. Maybe in the next Battle Tome we'll get a chance, but the ones that we do have a chance to play with are the Bubonic Blight Plague, Crimson Wheel Curse, Red Maw Plague, the Never Plague, and the Undulant Scourge. And I believe that the bloat fur eruption fits nicely amongst those terrifying afflictions that the Skaven can bring to bear. Let me know if you would like to hear anything more about the Clans Pestilens. I did a series on them forever ago, but the books have all evolved since then, so I'm more than happy to. Let me know your thoughts about this disease in the comments down below, and what plagues you think are still remaining. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.